much no contention on engineering cells and adult therapeutics to help solve a disease, right? So
unless, is there, in all the trials that they run, I'm sure there have been many, are there any consequences just like of turning on and off a gene? So a gene that's manageable, a gene like sickle cell anemia that you guys say is manageable to turn on and off almost. Like, are there any repercussions of that, or does it just, the problem just go away, or are there, side effects to changing a gene that has already been done?
I mean, that's a research question, right? You won't know the answer to that until you do it and follow the person. And the question is, how long do you want to follow the person? 1 year, 10 years? If you're going to make a better baby, the thought is you got to go through at least 3 generations for those babies to see it. They got some defects.
So long.
Which is, it's fine in fruit flies, but with humans, it take
a little longer.
A little longer, that's right. Yeah, probably at least 50 years.
I guess I wonder to get to a more poignant type of question.
Yeah.
Do you think it would be there would be a situation where humans would want to engineer the genome for, I guess, starting to bridge the gap from healthy to more advantageous for the future? I guess because sickle cell anemia, cancer, those of them, diseases, and especially terminal diseases, I think a lot of people can agree that if we're able to eliminate a high amount of suffering with this technology, that it's fine. The question would be, can you argue that it's unfair that you don't have a certain genotype of interest and somebody else does, and are you entitled to have that?
No, that's a great question. There are people that argue this is all about social justice and equality, and the big problem is we're going to make the gap between rich and poor bigger. And it's already destroying the planet, right? And
because the
rich really do have most of the resources and they don't share.
they can start to engineer their genomes.
And then if on top of that, they live longer and get better genomes. And then it could lead actually people resenting them so much that they kill them.
Violent revolution.
We certainly have lots of examples in our history where we don't like people who are different than us. Right now, without anything to do with genetics. Also without anything to do with Hitler had the eugenics, gene matting, right? Blood matters.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting to think about, because on one side, I think that you would eliminate, you would increase the gap between rich and poor people, because rich people will probably have the resources to do these genetic engineering techniques to themselves and make themselves a better, more
to their children.
Desirable.
Most of them don't want to do it to themselves.
Yeah.
They want to do it to their children.
But
they don't want to take a chance on themselves.
Exactly. But I guess I wonder sometimes, where does the line between disease and evolutionary advantage end? Because something like sickle cell anemia, that did have an evolutionary placeholder because it fended off slightly, or I'm not sure, I don't remember the study exactly, but it had some effect on outcomes with malaria. But maybe someone could argue that, well, I'm anxious all the time, and this is affecting my ability to perform in society. And some people aren't anxious, and it has to do with their genome. I should be entitled to not have that deficit.
Take Adderall.
Yeah. Well, so people do it. They manipulate their biochemistry in different ways. But
right.
And so I guess I wonder, like, the longer time goes on, the more things we define as disease, and anxiety is disease and things like that. So when is a disease not worthy of, or when is it worthy of genetic engineering?
No, it's a great question. What is a disease? We really know. We make it up, kind of.
Yeah.
And I think there are also a lot of social factors. I mean, when we talk about suffering, do we mean like physically suffering or suffering in society? Because if you don't have a certain disposition, or if you don't have a certain look or talent, that may not matter to your physical suffering. Like, again, I keep going back to the examples of being, musically inclined, or whatever, or athletic. and I'm not physically suffering, I'm healthy, but if I feel like I'm having, like I am
Resent all your
suffering
friends.
because I am not meeting this,
The requirements of society.
this
Or your
requirement.
friends even.
Yeah, so then should I,
Or your parents.
am I-
Even worse.
Yeah.
what is suffering then? Am I suffering, like,
No,
does it
it's a-
just
it's a great
go to the
question.
physical pain, like if you can measure pain tolerance? Or is it like just societal suffering and feeling like this loss of belonging? Then am I entitled to change my genome so I can feel better about myself?
It's very funny, right? Because what you just said is right. A lot of people feel really bad, and they're what they can do is restricted by the fact they're poor. But we don't give them money. Why would we give them a genome intervention?
That was
Just ask her.
brutal.
Is there, well,
we
I
know,
guess,
we know the fact they're poor
well,
makes them
I
miserable.
guess where
Yeah.
my argument would go is all of this research doesn't exist without funding. Like it doesn't exist without donors, doesn't
That's right. That's
exist.
definitely
So a lot of into possibly making something that's not profitable, into just researching and finding maybe silly things that won't work. So a lot of money goes in. So I guess if you're the person who's putting all this money into this research, saying, well, are you just going to distribute my money to the poor? I mean,
Everyone,
everybody, like distribute it to everybody
as
when.
opposed to just keeping it for myself, or like giving me the direct
I mean,
results of the research.
there are some very rich people who are funding research into immortality.
Wait, 1 second, George, I feel like you're falling out of the
Okay,
camera.
and
Can you
it's
just
just
real
for
fast?
them. It's just for them.
Okay.
They don't really give a damn about anybody else. But they want to live long enough so they can spend their billions of dollars in a reasonable way.
Yeah.
And they're the ones financing a lot of the out there research that NIH won't fund.
And I think it can also, the research, and it's important as scientists to know this, that the research that you do might not necessarily be used for what you thought it was going to be.
That's a good point.
And so when I do research, we talk about regulating cancer and these cancer therapies to mitigate some of the side effects of these new gene therapies. And so we are looking at health and we're looking at these noble purposes that everyone can agree on. But that doesn't mean that what I mean, you can use a rock to like build a house, or you can use it to throw at somebody, and like so the same thing can be used in two different ways. And so I think the scientist doesn't always necessarily have control over what their invention's used for.
Scientists virtually never has control over it.
Yeah,
Starting with
exactly.
the atomic bomb.
Yeah, I was gonna say that atomic bomb's a great example where,
The scientists were not happy with that.
yeah. So it's I think it can be difficult because a lot of these things you think, well, how's that gonna get funded? It doesn't necessarily get funded at the start. It inches, and you start with, and honestly, I don't know how I feel about it ethically, but I would venture to guess that it'll start with health. Then people will say that oh well, having other sorts of non-lethal diseases is something that we want to cure, and then at the end. Anything that's, a lot of diseases, especially psychological ones, are defined as non-desirable societal diseases. So those might qualify for something that someone would change. And I think there's definitely a consequence to that, not only in terms of income disparity, because certain people won't have access to it. I also think some of the interests would be too, let's say everyone got gene therapy. From a biological perspective, you're decreasing your diversity of people too, and that is what that's basically scientific inbreeding. It's not actual inbreeding, but you're giving everybody the same gene. So if something comes along that is a disease to that
Plague
gene,
or
plague, then you're
Wipes everybody out.
Could.
yeah.
Theoretically, sure.
So
Everybody's the same.
And then you have the issue where we've decided that something is undesirable, and so we think that everyone should have it. So for example, there have been multiple cases where the government has done forced sterilization of people with mental issues.
Yeah, we don't have a good history.
No, we do not have a good history. The entire eugenics movement is a great example. There was forced sterilization of people who were considered as less desirable, and they didn't want them to reproduce. So essentially, we could come to a point where, we've come up with a cure for anxiety that can be administered as an adult in the form of gene therapy. So where the state will force everyone to get that. That's also an issue.
an example of something that might be, you know, maybe it has a counterexample as well, but something like schizophrenia could be an interest of genetic diversity. So a lot of people who have schizophrenia, it's very damaging to their state of being, right? Like it's a disease and it makes you not observe reality necessarily in a beneficial way. But there are hyper creative people that are on the edge of schizophrenia, and that's actually produced a lot of societal benefit.
John Nash,
And
example
so,
A.
and so you know, maybe you could be limiting the biological potential by
The breadth of human
Right, yeah.
invention.
yeah.
I think it makes it more black and white rather than a gradient, you know? And that there aren't intermediates that can be good. But if you get rid of all of it all at once, then you just have the good and the bad, and you don't have the in-between that makes every person like individual.
Well, I think so. To switch gears a little bit, because there are, I think, a couple of topics that we're supposed to go over.
This is conversational. I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
mad. This has been
Oh, okay.
great.
Okay, good.
I'm very happy.
Well, one of the other ones that goes along with it, so synthetic biology can be applied to humans. I think that is a very contentious topic. Another one that's surprisingly contentious too, I guess with good reasons, is genetically modified organisms, like for industrial applications or farming applications. And so these same types of logic can be applied to plants or stock animals or
Like creating turkeys that have like extra large breasts so they produce better meat, but they have like miserable lives
yeah.
because they're so
Yeah.
overweighted. That's an actual legitimate problem like right now. That wasn't the cause of genetic engineering. I think that was a cause of selective breeding.
Yeah, selective breeding.
Is there any, as far as humans goes with food, is there any direct consequences of GMOs, or is there only speculation to like causes and effects, or do we have evidence that GMOs are in fact harmful? Because everyone is our product has no GMOs, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? And if I like, so is there anything that's inherently bad about GMOs, or is it a good thing? Like, is it not as bad as people think, or is it not as are the effects not as present as the food labels make them seem that
They're
they are?
biologically identical. You have tomatoes are very good. You just can't convince the public of that. In the US, we're pretty good at it. In Europe, they went crazy on this. And that's really the big worry about using genetics on humans. It's people, especially on embryos, that people react to that the way they react to the GMO foods and say, no.
So then what is the issue with GMOs?
Public image.
Well,
I mean, there was a monarch study. I don't know, you probably know the study.
Well, yeah, the monarch study, and so I think I guess I generally fall on the side of for GMO. I'm coming at the synthetic biologist, I don't think that's that big a surprise. But I think the argument against it would be that certain people use basically like antibiotic resistance genes and put them into plants, and that you basically give a plant the antidote to express a gene. So that when I spray a poison on a field, only the plants that have this gene will survive. And so that can be attributed similar to how we take penicillin and ampicillin, except we naturally have genes that are different than bacteria, so that's why we survive and the bacteria don't. But they do these same types of things. They put a gene that will make the plant survive and the other weeds not. And so the argument would be that you might get more voracious weeds and viruses that can stem from that. And then
Possible, yeah.
and then the other thing, which I think you were mentioning, is that people think that these exogenous genes, these genes that weren't naturally in another organism, they think that automatically makes them bad or unpredictable. And I think there are a lot of ways that people try to show that they are predictable. For example, they put vitamin A from, like, let's say a carrot. Carrots have vitamin A, it's keratin. They put that in rice. Is that bad? Because that's GMO. And so that would be an example. I don't think GMOs you could make it bad. I guess you could have the potential of making a bad GMO. Let's say you put some virus in it, and you can put anything you want.
Yep.
But that doesn't make GMOs the whole bad. That makes certain aspects. It makes what you put in it bad.
Especially building off of that, the vitamin A example was like a really good one because a lack of vitamin A, if I remember correctly, can cause blindness, and that's actually a huge problem in developing areas. So having genetically modified rice that already has excessive vitamin A actually cures a serious societal issue.
I was gonna say, because everyone, in my world, not knowing anything about it, it's a bad thing and it's on all the food labels and everything. But if you can create a plant that can, or a type of corn or wheat that can grow in a desert or in the very poor soil in Africa and feed an entire population,
Is it really bad?
is it bad?
Well, you have to look at the economics of it too, what it does to the farmers, the small farmers, usually wipes them out.
That's true.
It's only the commercial farmers big enough to take advantage of this.
But if you're feeding so many more, those farmers,
there's
those local
a whole
farmers aren't
bunch-
feeding the need that is there. And if there is a way to feed an entire population,
They don't get the food free.
I mean, yes,
That's
of
the
course.
way that we're back to economics.
It's free, yeah.
Of course, everybody wants to eliminate hunger and feed people. That's cool, let's say, but it's not just a scientific problem.
That's interesting to think about. Yeah, a lot of it, and actually a lot of people do. They place hatred on the companies a lot.
Yes, they do.
and
The Terminator gene, you may remember.
Yeah, and, exactly. And then I've seen personally protests against Monsanto. Which is
Well, Monsanto was,
yeah. Oh yeah.
That
the
is
seed only
that
worked
is
for 1 year.
so interesting. Oh my goodness, because I basically was indoctrinated in my AP Bio class, not in a bad way. I mean, we watched like the documentary about the bees and they're almost they're dying and Monsanto putting bad things. So I just think that's interesting that you said that they blame the companies, like as if you didn't think Monsanto was this big devil that I know it to be.
Well, yeah.
And so I think, as like anything, the situation's complex. I think a lot of people, and I will disclose that I do not know enough about this to make a very educated opinion. But I think from what I've heard from people who are highly opposed, is that they don't in addition to not liking GMOs, they don't like their business practices. And so
That's definitely true.
that would go along with, that I've never really thought about that, but, GMOs, in the same way that the rich would get these genetic engineered children, this might also segregate and have only commercial farmers be able to have access to GMOs. And that's not always, or actually that may not be true. There are some efforts like the Golden Rice that are trying to basically provide access to everybody, but maybe it still creates some inequality. So it's interesting.
Well, you still have to persuade people that yellow rice is
Yeah, well,
equivalent of white rice.
they people burn those.
You're not
fields.
trying to kill us all.
Yeah, so I mean,
No, it's complicated. It's complicated.
but generally speaking, I think especially with GMOs, I think there are a lot of applications where you could do something that's beneficial in terms of us getting nutrients and might not have large side effects to, I guess, help long term, and I guess that can be of interest. And yeah, I know there are other problems like biological diversity is another thing that people worry about.
So it's okay to eat things that maybe aren't natural.
I mean,
Well, you know the answer to that. Most of the things you eat are natural in this country.
They've
Go
all
to the
been
grocery
artificially
store.
selected.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and like
Look
even
at the box.
yeah, Pop-Tarts or anything else, none of that is natural.
Yeah.
Well, this idea of natural is just.
That's a little strange.
Or like
too.
organic.
Yeah, like
What does that mean? Like it means made of carbon.
like organic compounds can be really dangerous for you. Like some organic compounds are used as pesticides,
Mhm.
right? You don't want to eat that. It's organic.
Yeah.
I
I
think-
don't know what that
It's
means.
not
Yeah,
good
I
for
think
you.
people equivalent naturally occurring to be safer.
To be good, right, exactly.
But I think just on a level that plants, for the most part, for most of their existence, were not designed to our existence.
Mhm. They were
We've
designed
been
for theirs.
selectively breeding them to
Yeah.
be better for us. but they need to proliferate, so they have their own evolution. So if we can control that, as long as we feed them, they propagate, and we can kind of control their evolution by putting our own genes in. It might not necessarily be bad. It's just like, for instance, carrots. Carrots used to be white, and now they're orange because people bred them. They don't need keratin, this photopigment in the ground. It doesn't do anything, right? But people did it because they wanted it. So it's an example of, it's not natural, but it works out for us. It works out for the carrots because we keep planting.
Really, really white. I didn't know that.
I read it recently.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, they used to be white. People just selectively bred them to be orange. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's vitamin A, but and it looks prettier.
Yeah, I feel weird eating
Easter's
stuff.
coming up.
Easter is coming
It's a
up.
pastel.
All right, Rohan is telling me that we are at the end of our time today.
Okay, good.
So
Thank you.
I have to do my thank you for watching our conversation on bioethics. We touched on other things that I thought we'd touch about and touched such interesting things. That was such a good discussion. Thank you so much, you guys, for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks so much.
thank you. It's fun.
So I'm assuming there's gonna be bubbles in the video where they get a click to sort of subscribe. All right, so there's probably gonna be a bubble above Sam, so click that bubble that it pops up, and there's gonna be a bubble above George, so also click that bubble for the people watching. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to those 2 bubbles, and
Good for you.
definitive ending. Thank you guys so
Okay.
much.
All right.
Thanks.
Awesome.
No, it's fun.